Given its sheer nature, the horror genre is a corner of cinema that is so often brimming with death and destruction. For the slasher subgenre, that is well and truly the case, with this slice of the horror pie notorious for its high body counts and ludicrously lavish kills. 1974's Black Christmas and 1978's Halloween are viewed as the forefathers of the slasher movie, ushering in a huge boom in popularity in such similar pictures as the 70s rolled into the 1980s. And much like those two trailblazers, the subsequent years would see iconic and not so iconic killers introduced, memorable protagonists running wild, and the tried, tested, and quite frankly tired trope of the final girl. For the victims of these pictures, the hope was that their inevitable deaths would be swift and over with before they even knew what was going on. However, in some cases, these victims had a moment of stark, scared clarity where they realised what was about to happen to them and that the Grim Reaper was knocking on the door. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are the 10 greatest I'm dead and I know it moments in slasher horror movies. Number 10. Sherry, the Prowler. Released in 1981, The Prowler is a slasher movie that's gone on to become quite the cult favourite amongst horror hounds. That's not down to its plot or performances, mind, but more down to the exceptional special effects work by the legendary Tom Savini. Savini himself has at times cited his work on The Prowler as being the absolute best of his career, when considering this is someone who has wowed with his makeup and effects work on the likes of Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Creepshow, Maniac, The Burning, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and 2 Friday the 13th pictures. That's quite the statement. One of the more gnarly death scenes of The Prowler is the demise of Lisa Dunsheath's Sherry. With the mysterious titular killer having already killed her beau Carl, Sherry is blissfully unaware of this as she takes a shower. Things take a turn for the worse for Sherry when her shower door opens though, and it's here that she's greeted by the sight of a masked killer and a pitchfork. And with that, Dunsheath's character is brutally ran through with said pitchfork. Number 9. Tina Gray, A Nightmare on Elm Street. One of the things that Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street does so brilliantly is how it establishes the concept of the movie and subsequent franchise in just a matter of minutes. As the film opens, the audience is instantly in the dream of Amanda Weiss's Tina Gray. There, we get our first look at the series' infamous boiler room setting, our first tease of Freddy Krueger, and see a panicked would-be victim, Tina, awaken to find 4 slashes on her nightgown, indicating how the actions of her dream had somehow pierced through to the real world. It's when Tina awakens from her nightmare that she realizes that something awful is soon to happen, as reflected by how she immediately reaches for a cross upon waking in a cold sweat. From here, Tina would detail her experience to her friends, including the series' main protagonist Nancy Thompson, played of course by Heather Langenkamp, which in itself was enough to give Freddy the strength to then torment these friends in their respective dreams. As for Tina, she would be killed off shortly after, regaling her pals with his tale, becoming the first on-screen victim of Freddy. Number 8. Jackson, Terror Train. Roger Spottiswood's Terror Train is very much a prime example of the slasher boom ushered in by John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978. Released just 2 years after Carpenter's iconic offering, Terror Train features Jamie Lee Curtis heading up a cast of pretty young things who find themselves targeted by a mysterious masked killer. Oh, and said targeting happens when these college kids are celebrating New Year's Eve by partying on a train. Having been locked up in a psychiatric hospital 3 years prior after a prank was played on him, the killer here ends up being Kenny Hampson. But not only does Kenny conceal his identity throughout this path of bloody murder, he changes his mask several times in order to take advantage of the fancy dress setting that he finds himself in. The first time to properly see Kenny in action, it's Anthony Sherwood's Jackson who ends up offed, with the lizard mask adorned Jackson believing that he's drunkenly joking around with one of his frat buddies who happens to be dressed like Groucho Marx. It's only once the mask is raised that Sherwood's character realizes what's going on. He then immediately gets his head smashed into a bathroom mirror. Number 7. Crispian Davison, You're Next. Adam Wingard's You're Next is arguably the best slasher movie of the past 10 years. Initially screened in 2011 before a wider release 2 years later, You're Next stands up as one of the all-time great slashers, and Sharni Vincent's Erin is as badass a protagonist as has ever been committed to screen. In this impressive picture, Erin accompanies her boyfriend Crispian, played by AJ Bowen, to a family reunion at the Davisons' rural vacation home. That all goes to the dogs, of course, when a trio of masked assailants attack the family and take them out one by one. Well, apart from Crispian, who had bailed in search of help and left his partner Erin behind. Thankfully, it turns out that Erin actually grew up on a survivalist compound, meaning this trio of killers had bit off way more than they could chew. From there, Erin takes down each of these invaders, including a memorable death by blender scene. The initial twist of You're Next is that Felix Davison and his partner Z are in on these murders as part of a way to get their inheritance. In a bigger twist, it's revealed how Crispian is also in on this, as shown when Erin hears a phone call from him that gives the game away. So, when Crispian returns to the home and spots Erin listening to his phone call confession, he knows that he is very much next. Number 6. Tatum Riley, Scream. Oh, you want to play psycho killer? Unfortunately for Tatum, yes, they really did. It's likely fair to say that Rose McGowan's Tatum Riley, along with Drew Barrymore's Casey Becker, of course, has the most memorable death in the entire Scream franchise. Firstly, that death scene remains so notable for its sheer uniqueness, with Tatum having her neck broken after getting caught in a cat flap. Secondly, it was a major deal at the time because Tatum was such a feisty, entertaining character who many presumed would make it through at least until Scream's final act. Playing very much up to that feisty characterization, Tatum's demise saw her quip wise with Ghostface, initially presuming that it was Jamie Kennedy's Randy joking around. It's then that the youngest Riley sibling mocks Ghostface, asking not to be killed so that she can star in the sequel to the terrors that are happening. Sadly, the penny then drops for Tatum when Ghostface pulls out a knife and moves to slice her arm, and with that, Tatum Riley realized she'd done f***ed up. Number 5. Sandra Deer, Friday the 13th, Part 2. There are numerous Friday the 13th characters who could be included in this list, but the one who gets the nod here is Marta Kober's Sandra Deer of Friday the 13th Part 2. Of course, this second Friday the 13th picture is the film that fully introduced Jason Voorhees to the world. By this point in time, Jason was just the young son of Pamela Voorhees who had tragically died at Camp Crystal Lake, in turn inspiring Pamela to go on a murder spree. Flipping things up, Friday the 13th Part 2 has the not dead, now adult Jason on his own mission of revenge, carving up any and all pretty young things he could get his hands on. One such pretty young thing was Sandra, as she and her boyfriend Jeff were both impaled by a spear courtesy of Jason while they were having sex. For Jeff, he didn't see it, coming, but Sandra had a brief moment where she realized what was about to happen, that being Jason piling her and her beau up like a skewered kebab. Number 4. Dr. Ranbir Sartain, Halloween 2018. While the beloved Sam Loomis, played by the late great Donald Pleasance, was sadly long gone by the time 2018's Halloween rolled around, what franchise fans did get was one of Loomis's former students in the shape of Dr. Haluk Bilginer's Dr. Ranbir Sartain. In a move that would have had Loomis shrieking in disgust, Sartain was eventually revealed to have been the mastermind behind the entire escape of Michael Myers from Smith's Grove after 40 years. For Sartain, he had become so obsessed with the shape that he wanted to see Myers out in the wild to do what Michael Myers does best. And this is all revealed while Bilginer's character kills Will Patton's deputy Hawkins, or so it seems, in order to stop him from permanently taking down Michael. Next, audiences would get to see some perfect karma play out as Dr. Sartain is murdered by Myers, and there's the fist-bumping moment when Sartain realizes that unleashing Michael Myers on the world means he himself is in the shape's crosshairs. As the doctor, who was also Michael's longtime psychiatrist, pleads with Myers to say something, what he's greeted with is having his head squashed by the boot of Haddonfield's most infamous son. Number 3. Hal Wainwright, Happy Birthday to Me. For Hal Wainwright, played by Lawrence Dane, the image here is of him realizing he is absolutely screwed during the final act of 1981's Happy Birthday to Me. Opposite Hal in this shot, we have a party table that features a bunch of dead bodies strapped to chairs, including the corpse of his long-deceased wife. If that wasn't bad enough, next to Hal is his deranged daughter Ginny, played by Melissa Sue Anderson, who is celebrating both A, her birthday, and B, having slaughtered a bunch of her friends and dug up her dead mother. Dane's character had returned home to mark his daughter's birthday, yet all he found was chaos, carnage, and his own impending death, with Ginny quickly slicing Hal's throat after she'd got done blowing her candles out. Of course, Happy Birthday to Me has one of the most nuts slasher endings imaginable. In a finale that seems tacked on to what was supposed to be the original ending, Happy Birthday to Me concludes by revealing how the real killer of the movie is Ginny's best pal, Anne, played by Tracy E. Bregman, who is actually Ginny's half-sister and has been wearing a latex mask of her sister's face to commit the film's murders. As you do. Number 2. Ramone, Terrifier. Why Ramone, played by Eric Zamora, knows he's dead in this Terrifier image cannot actually be shown, for, like so much of this 2016 movie, the content is far too graphic to serve up here. For context, the opening of Terrifier finds David Howard Thornton's eerie Art the Clown following a couple of drunk partygoers, Tara, played by Jenna Cannell, and Dawn, played by Catherine Corcoran, into a pizzeria. After making goo-goo eyes at the girls, Art is kicked out of his pizza joint after spelling out his own name in on the bathroom wall. Later that night, Art returns to the pizzeria, and it's here that poor Ramone has his "I'm dead and I know it" moment. After walking to the front of house, Ramone isn't only greeted by the creepy clown who'd been forcibly removed from the premises for his literal behavior, but he also finds the decapitated, mutilated head of his boss. With that, the sad truth of the matter is that Ramone knows he's next on the list of Art the Clown. Then again, you could fill a solid 3 or 4 entries on this list solely with some of the other unfortunate characters to come across Art in Terrifier. Number 1. Julius. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. While the Friday the 13th franchise has already been discussed, with Sandra of Friday the 13th Part 2 in the spotlight, it would be remiss to compile such a list and not include Julius of Jason Takes Manhattan fame. Played by V.C. Dupree, the 8th Friday the 13th picture establishes that Julius is quite the handy boxer, and when he finds himself coming face to face with Jason Voorhees on a New York City rooftop, Julius embarks on a hugely entertaining, memorable fight. Using his boxing skills, Dupree's character decides to lay in some left hooks, some right jabs, and a bit of the old duck and weave when confronted by Jason. To the guy's credit, he lands shot after shot on Voorhees, yet it's his own offense that proves to be his ultimate downfall. Considering that he's long cemented his status as near unstoppable by this point of the franchise, Jason casually absorbs each and every hit from Julius until this budding boxer goes and boxes himself out. It's then, with Julius having spent all of his energy, that the character knows he's toast. From there, Jason delivers one solitary punch to his foe, knocking Julius's head clean off his shoulders.